Ethan leaned against the cool metal railing of the bus station, glancing at the streetlights flickering above him. Returning home from college always felt like stepping into a memory he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to relive. His father had left for a week-long business trip, leaving the house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. It was in this stillness that Ethan felt both comforted and unsettled. Home had always been a mix of familiarity and unspoken rules, but tonight it carried an unusual sense of anticipation. He had received a call earlier that day from Michael, his father's longtime friend. Michael was a figure Ethan had known since childhood, a man whose laugh was warm, whose advice often struck deeper than his own father's words, and whose presence had always carried a comforting weight. Now, at 22, Ethan found himself considering the invitation with a strange blend of excitement and hesitation. Michael had asked him over for dinner, explaining that Ryan, his husband, was away visiting family. The casual tone of the call couldn't disguise the subtle undertone of loneliness in Michael's voice. Driving to Michael's house, Ethan replayed the conversation in his mind. He reminded himself that Michael was married, that Ryan was away, and that any misstep could have consequences he couldn't undo. Yet, beneath the caution, there was a thrill, a sense of stepping into uncharted territory. He parked his car and walked up the brick path, noticing how the house had changed little over the years. Warm lights glowed through the curtains, painting the lawn in soft golden hues, and the scent of grilled food lingered in the air. Michael opened the door before Ethan could knock, smiling broadly. "Ethan, come in, come in. It's been too long." His voice carried the same mix of warmth and familiarity that had always drawn Ethan in. Inside, the living room was arranged as it always had been, with plush furniture and framed photographs lining the walls, snapshots of vacations, celebrations, and a life Ethan had admired from the edges. Michael's presence felt larger than the room, commanding attention without effort, and Ethan felt an unexpected flutter in his chest. Dinner was simple but elegant. They talked about college, career plans, and friends. Michael asked questions that went beyond small talk, probing gently into Ethan's ambitions, fears, and disappointments. There was an intimacy in the way he listened, a genuine interest that made Ethan feel seen in a way he rarely experienced. Occasionally, Michael's hand would brush against Ethan's while passing a dish or adjusting the table, brief contacts that left a lingering warmth. Ethan noticed these moments but convinced himself they were harmless, part of Michael's natural ease. As the evening progressed, Michael shared subtle glimpses of his life with Ryan. He spoke carefully, never disparaging his husband, but revealing cracks in the relationship, quiet nights, emotional distance, and the frustration of unspoken conflicts. Ethan felt a twinge of guilt for feeling drawn to someone already committed, yet he couldn't deny the magnetic pull of empathy and understanding. Every smile, every reassuring nod, and every attentive question seemed to forge a connection that went beyond simple friendship. After dinner, they moved to the living room, sipping tea in silence for a few minutes. The quiet was comfortable, almost heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts and mutual understanding. Michael placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, a gesture of support that lingered just a heartbeat too long. Ethan felt a rush of conflicting emotions, gratitude, confusion, and a thrill of something unspoken. He stood, preparing to leave, yet hesitated, aware that the night had shifted something between them. As he walked back to his car, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this visit was more than a simple dinner. A door had opened, subtle and quiet, one that promised more emotional entanglement than he had anticipated. He drove home with his mind spinning, aware that his connection with Michael had taken a turn that might not have an easy path back. The night ended with questions that had no immediate answers, leaving Ethan restless, curious, and cautiously intrigued about what might come next. That a few days after that first evening, Ethan found himself thinking about Michael more often than he expected. The memory of the gentle hand on his shoulder lingered, not in a physical way, but as a symbol of comfort and understanding. He hadn't realized how much he craved that sense of being truly seen. College had taught him independence, but it had also left him feeling isolated at times, and Michael's presence had always felt like a rare anchor in that drifting sea. When Michael texted him unexpectedly, asking if Ethan could stop by to discuss a career choice he was struggling with, Ethan hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. Something about Michael's messages carried a sincerity that made saying no feel almost impossible. Driving over, he rehearsed casual conversation topics in his mind, hoping to avoid the tight knot of emotions he sensed rising in him. Yet deep down, he knew this visit would not be casual. It never was with Michael. Michael greeted him warmly, his smile tinged with exhaustion. "Ethan, I'm glad you came," he said, stepping aside so Ethan could enter. There was an intensity in Michael's eyes tonight, a mixture of vulnerability and weariness that made Ethan's chest tighten. They moved to the study, where Michael had set up a small desk with papers and notes scattered across it. But the work on the table felt secondary to the emotional undertone that lingered between them as they spoke about Ethan's future, job offers, graduate school options, and creative pursuits. Michael listened with unwavering attention. He asked probing questions, not out of judgment, but to understand Ethan's motivations, fears, and dreams. Ethan, in turn, found himself opening up in ways he rarely did with anyone else. He spoke of insecurities, past mistakes, and a loneliness he sometimes felt despite being surrounded by friends. Michael nodded thoughtfully, occasionally offering insights that were both practical and deeply human. Each word built a bridge between them, subtle but unmistakable, a connection grounded in empathy and trust. Then, Michael's voice softened. "I've been feeling distant from Ryan lately," he admitted, his gaze dropping to the desk. "It's like we're in the same house, but living in different worlds. Some nights, I just wonder if we're holding on to something that isn't there anymore." Ethan felt a pang of sympathy and unease. He knew Michael was married, yet hearing the vulnerability in his voice stirred emotions he couldn't easily ignore. He wanted to reach out, to reassure him, but hesitated, aware of the boundaries he had no right to cross. Still, the conversation continued, weaving between work, personal reflection, and the subtle confessions of loneliness. Michael shared how small gestures often went unnoticed in his marriage, how words of appreciation were rare, and how the absence of emotional intimacy left him restless. Ethan listened intently, feeling an unexpected kinship. He recognized parts of his own experiences mirrored in Michael's. Moments of invisibility, longing for understanding, and a need for someone to truly care. By the time the evening wound down, Ethan and Michael had lingered in the study far longer than planned. The light from the desk lamp cast soft shadows, and the quiet of the house seemed to amplify their connection. Michael's hand briefly brushed Ethan's as he passed a notebook, lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. The gesture was innocent on the surface, yet the undercurrent of emotion made it impossible to ignore. Ethan felt a rush of warmth, guilt, and something unnamed that tightened in his chest. As he walked to the door to leave, Michael stopped him with a gentle hand on his arm. "Thanks for being here, Ethan," he said quietly, eyes meeting his. The simplicity of the words, combined with the intensity of the gaze, made Ethan pause. He wanted to linger, to say more, but he knew he had to step back. With a small, uneasy smile, he nodded and left, the night air cool against his face. Driving home, Ethan's thoughts raced. The boundaries he had tried to respect were blurred, not by overt action, but by emotional intimacy and mutual vulnerability. He realized that what he felt for Michael was no longer simple admiration or friendship. It was complicated, charged with feelings that he didn't fully understand. The evening ended with an unresolved tension, a quiet question lingering. How far could an emotional connection stretch before it became something more? The following week, Ethan felt a restlessness he couldn't shake. Every text from Michael, every brief phone call, seemed to stir a mixture of anticipation and unease. He knew the emotional bond between them had deepened beyond simple friendship, yet he also recognized the fragile boundaries he was navigating. The awareness of Michael's marriage and his father's trust weighed heavily on him, creating a quiet tension that pulsed beneath every thought. One rainy evening, Michael sent a message asking if Ethan could come over to talk. Ethan hesitated, staring at the screen for several long seconds before replying yes. Driving through the wet streets, the rhythmic sound of wipers against the windshield mirrored the storm of conflicting feelings inside him. When he arrived, Michael opened the door with a weary smile that seemed to carry both relief and guilt. "Thanks for coming," he said simply, stepping aside to let Ethan in. They sat in the living room, the soft glow of the lamps casting long shadows across the room. Silence hung for a moment, thick and unspoken, before Michael began to speak. "I need to be honest with you," he said, his voice low. "I've crossed a line in my own heart. You mean more to me than I should allow. And I didn't realize how much I was leaning on you emotionally until it happened." Ethan's stomach tightened. He understood the gravity of the confession, the careful acknowledgement of boundaries that had almost been blurred. He had felt it too, the pull of connection, the thrill of understanding, but he also knew the line must not be crossed. Ethan chose his words carefully. I care about you, Michael," he admitted. "More than I should, maybe, but I don't want to hurt anyone. Especially not Ryan, and not your marriage, or even my dad's trust in you." Michael nodded, a mix of regret and relief crossing his features. "You're right," he said. "I value what we have, but I need to fix things where they belong. With Ryan, with myself, and I need to let you find someone your own age, someone who can love you freely, without complications." The conversation shifted then, from confessions to reflection. They talked about the moments that had brought them close, the dinners, the late-night conversations, the small gestures that carried more weight than they should have. Ethan realized that what he had interpreted as connection had been a mirror of his own longing for validation, comfort, and understanding. Michael's attention had felt like a safe harbor, but he now understood that it wasn't meant to become a romantic shore. By the end of the evening, they had reached an unspoken truce. Michael thanked Ethan for his honesty and his presence, and Ethan thanked Michael for the lessons in empathy, vulnerability, and emotional resilience. The atmosphere, once charged with tension, now carried a quiet peace, a mutual acknowledgement that their bond, while significant, was meant to be contained within friendship and understanding, rather than crossing into forbidden territory. As Ethan left Michael's house, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. He took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief, sadness, and clarity. He understood that boundaries were not just rules, but forms of respect for others, for relationships, and for oneself. The experience had tested him, challenged him, and ultimately helped him grow, shaping his understanding of intimacy, desire, and ethical choices. Back at his own home, Ethan reflected on the past weeks. He realized that some connections were meant to teach rather than to be acted upon. Michael's vulnerability had opened a door to understanding himself better, to recognizing his own desires, and to acknowledging the importance of boundaries. He felt gratitude for the experience, even as he recognized the need to move forward, focusing on his own life and future. The night ended quietly, with Ethan sitting by his window, looking at the stars through the darkened sky. He felt a sense of completion and resolve. Some bonds, he realized, could be profound and transformative without becoming romantic or physical. They could exist as lessons, reflections, and emotional milestones, shaping the person you were becoming. And for Ethan, that was enough. The chapter with Michael was closing, not with regret or bitterness, but with understanding, respect, and the quiet promise of growth.